Go ahead and subscribe, please. This case takes place in the USA in the year 2001. How a 24-year cold case was solved by a water bottle. The murder of Leslie Preer. 21 years ago, on the morning of May 2, 2001, the quiet, tree-lined street of Drummond Avenue in Chevy Chase, Maryland, looked exactly like it did every other spring weekday. Kids were heading to school, professionals were grabbing coffee before the commute, and no one could imagine that behind one of the red brick homes something horrific had already happened. 40-9-year-old Leslie Preer was one of the most reliable people you could ever meet. Every morning she left the house around 9 a.m. to catch the bus to her office job in Washington, D.C. Her husband, Calvin Sandy Preer, kissed her goodbye at 7:45 a.m. and went to work as usual. Their daughter Lauren was away at college. By 10:30 a.m. Leslie still hadn't shown up at Specialties, Inc., the advertising firm where she worked. That was completely out of character. She never missed a day without calling. Her boss, Brett Reedy, grew worried. He started making phone calls. Lauren didn't know where her mom was. Sandy hadn't heard from her either. Alarmed, Sandy left his office and drove straight home. Brett met him there. When they arrived at 4824 Drummond Avenue just after 11:35 a.m., the front door was unlocked, something Leslie never did. They stepped inside and immediately saw chaos: blood in the foyer, an overturned table, a rug dragged toward the living room. Brett called 911 while Sandy searched frantically for his wife. The family dog was locked in the basement, but Leslie was nowhere to be found downstairs. Police arrived within minutes. Upstairs in the master bathroom they made the terrible discovery: Leslie's body lying face down in the shower, lifeless in a shallow pool of water. At first everyone hoped it was a tragic accident. Maybe she had slipped, hit her head, and tried to clean herself up. Investigators waited for the autopsy. 2 days later the results destroyed any hope. Leslie had been strangled. Her head had been repeatedly slammed against the hard foyer floor and the sharp edge of the shoe molding. The killer had then dragged her upstairs, placed her in the shower, and turned the water on in an attempt to wash away evidence and stage an accidental fall. Crucially, the cleanup attempt was rushed and incomplete. Forensic teams found blood that belonged to someone else, an unknown male. Droplets under the dining room window, in the kitchen doorway, on the back door handle, and most importantly, skin cells under Leslie's fingernails. She had fought hard for her life and scratched her attacker. The timeline was extremely tight. Sandy left at 7:45 a.m. Leslie was alone for roughly an hour and 15 minutes before she would normally leave for work. Brett and Sandy returned around 11:35 a.m. That meant the killer had less than 4 hours, and probably closer to 2.5, to enter the home, commit the crime, attempt to destroy evidence, and escape. In 2001, the unknown male DNA did not match anyone in CODIS, the national database. Every close family member and friend was tested. Sandy was quickly cleared. No matches. Neighbors heard and saw nothing unusual. With no obvious motive and no witnesses, the case went cold. Lauren stayed in regular contact with detectives for years. Sadly, Sandy passed away in 2017, never knowing who took his wife's life, and never fully escaping the cloud of suspicion that sometimes follows surviving spouses. But the Montgomery County Cold Case Unit never gave up. And year after year, technology got better. In September 2022, they sent the DNA from under Leslie's fingernails to Othram Inc., a private lab that specializes in forensic genetic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer. For the first time in Maryland history, full genome sequencing was used on a cold case. The breakthrough came quickly. The lab found distant genetic matches to a person living in Romania who had uploaded their DNA to a public genealogy site. That person had never met the killer, but shared enough DNA to start building a family tree. After 2 years of meticulous work, detectives narrowed it down to one name living in the United States: Eugene Theodore Gliger. Eugene had dated Lauren Prier in high school. They met when she was 15. He was charming, outgoing, came from a wealthy family, and lived only 10 minutes away. Leslie welcomed him warmly, invited him for meals, took him on family beach trips, played board games with him. Sandy, however, always felt something was off about the boy. The couple broke up amicably when they went to different colleges. By 2001, when Leslie was killed, Eugene was 21, and they had almost no contact, only occasional polite hellos at mutual friends' parties. As a teenager and young adult, Eugene had a troubling record: arrests for weapons possession, DUI, and he was a suspect in several local residential thefts. He even matched the description of a young man who assaulted a woman near Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, though Lauren defended him at the time, and no charges were filed. Amazingly, his name had surfaced once before. In January 2002, a former neighbor told police the Gliger house often had visits from officers for noise complaints and underage drinking, and they wondered if Eugene could be involved. Original investigators dismissed it. No contact with the family, no apparent motive, no reason to suspect him. He was never even asked for a DNA sample. Fast forward to 2024. On June 9th, Eugene returned from a trip to Europe and landed at Dallas International Airport. During what appeared to be a routine secondary screening, customs officers offered him water bottles that had been strategically placed on a table. Eugene took one, drank, and threw it away. Detectives retrieved the discarded bottle, tested it, and got an exact match to the crime scene profile from 2001. 9 days later, on June 18, 2024, U.S. Marshals arrested 45-year-old Eugene Gliger outside his apartment in Washington, D.C. while he was drinking coffee and scrolling on his phone. The interrogation lasted only 24 minutes. Detectives told him his DNA matched the evidence found under Leslie's fingernails. Eugene repeatedly said he had no recollection and didn't understand. When a detective pointed out there were no tears in his eyes despite his emotional display, Eugene became angry, demanded a lawyer, and the interview ended. In May 2025, Eugene Gliger pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, admitting he took Leslie's life but claiming it was not premeditated. He faces up to 30 years in prison. Sentencing is scheduled for August 28, 2025. The question everyone asks remains unanswered: why? There was no forced entry, nothing was stolen, and Leslie had always been kind to him. Prosecutors believe it was likely a spur-of-the-moment act. Given Eugene's past as a suspect in local break-ins, the leading theory is that he entered the home intending to burglarize it. He already knew the layout from years earlier, ran into Leslie unexpectedly, panicked, and attacked. Instead of taking anything, he spent his remaining time trying and failing to erase evidence. Lauren Prier, now an adult, says the betrayal is almost impossible to process. The same young man who once sat at their dinner table, whom her mother treated like family, looked her in the eye years later and calmly said, "I'm so sorry about her mother's death." Just weeks before his arrest, they ran into each other at a restaurant. "He didn't seem weird at all," she said. "How you can look someone in the eye knowing what you did, it's pretty unreal." Friends and co-workers described Eugene as calm, positive, charitable, the last person they would suspect. Yet ex-wives and others who knew him more closely described a very different side: someone who could become aggressive, throw things, punch walls, and intimidate when challenged. After 24 years, Leslie's family finally knows who took her life. There is no such thing as closure, but as State's Attorney John McCarthy said, they know who did it to her. On August 28, 2025, Lauren and her family hope Eugene Gligor will finally answer the one question that still haunts them. Why? Justice may have taken nearly a quarter century and required a discarded water bottle in an airport, but it arrived.